For those who don't know me, Nick Pope, Chair of ComSEO. I remember when I took over this gig about 4 years ago, I went and saw our patron, Nell King, and I went in and said, I'm Chair of ComSEO, what's ComSEO? Well, it's the Confederation of Service Charities. Good gosh, yeah. I left and went back and saw my predecessor, John McCowan. I said, it's quite a tricky interview that on acronyms. He said, yeah, the same happened to me 5 years before. Why don't you change it? But it's stuck. We are ComSEO, the Service Confederation of Service Charities. And actually, funny enough on branding, I was in Riyadh last week. I arrived in a thunderstorm in Saudi Arabia, which was a bit of a shock. And I was doing a little bit of work with KPMG, and I opened up my computer, and the first thing on the moniker on the KPMG computer is Thrive Together. So either they've stolen the brand name, or, and we've stolen the brand name, or they are the 11th region. Saudi Arabia, bring it on. Just want to pick up on the word thriving. Okay, so what we are aiming for, I think, in society is an armed forces community which thrives, which is valued and offers value to society, and where necessary is supported by society. By society, I could mean statutory services, the third sector, or the nation writ large. If we do that, then in the future we can have a thriving, serving armed forces community, because young men and women will see the value of service to the nation. So hold that thought. I wanted to roll the camera back a bit and pick up on some way top themes in terms of demography, in terms of stakeholder communities, be it government, be it third sector, and the like, just to give us a bit of a thought process to hang on to during questions and answers. So firstly, I just wanted to talk to demography. What you see in front of me, I'm going to break down this slide a little bit, so bear with me. In the 2021 census of England and Wales, the Legion, British Legion, was successful advocates in asking for a question of, were you a veteran? Brilliant question, because for the first time it gave us a rich data set to understand the locations and the numbers of the veterans community. Well, I guess I better stop there actually and just jump down a little rabbit hole. What do we mean by veteran? Funny enough, different charities have a different view of this. Most take the view that 1 day service qualifies you to be a veteran. I had a conversation last year with the Ukrainian defence minister who was asking me about veterans in the UK, and I gave her this definition. And she looked a little bit shocked, and I said, well, how do you qualify in Ukraine to be a veteran? And she said, a minimum of 24 years service, or 1 month in combat operations where you're fired on every day. And she paused, and she then said, of course, I now have 4 million of those in Ukraine. But it felt like a kind of World War I moment about to hit Ukraine. Nonetheless, we are starting with a day's service in our definitions. Look at the slide. On the left-hand side, there's a picture which has got a sort of straight line and then some bar charts against it. The straight line represents the UK population writ large. On the bottom axis is a percentage number. On the y-axis is age groups by 5 years. Their area under the straight lines left and right adds up to 100%. So broadly in UK, we have broadly the same number of females as we do males in each group. Broadly, the numbers start to decline as you go above 70 years of age. Now compare and contrast that with the bar charts, which is the veterans community. There are 1.84 million veterans in England and Wales in 2021. So these numbers are 5 years old. So 1/3 of our veterans community in 2021 was above the age of 80. Predominantly the World War II generation, who are increasingly departing from this life, and the National Service generation, which was predominantly white and was predominantly, if not exclusively, male. The next third is above the age of 50 to 55, up to 80. Again, predominantly male, and again, this is the British Army on the Rhine generation. Same for the Royal Navy and for the Royal Air Force. And then the bottom third are those who are below the age of 50, who have done time in service but have left to find jobs outside in second and third and fourth careers. 5 years on from that, most of the World War II generation have gone, so the demographics are changing. So the number of veterans in this country is falling off. And that has consequences for things like how we think about dementia, how we think about connections with society. So from some of our charities, they're looking quite strategically about connection and about the services that they provide. So if you go to Star and Garter, which is one of our largest care home providers, they're thinking quite heavily about whether to do outreach services for dementia, for instance. So these kind of slides matter to us in terms of thinking about policy themes at the government level and the way that the sector operates. On the right-hand side of the diagram is a map of England and Wales, and it demonstrates where our veterans community was in 2021. And relatively, London, for instance, in Greater London, is a veterans-free zone, the area that's shown in blue. The area around the A1M moving up to the north, that's where the Air Force choose to serve and to settle. The area down near Gosport, where the Navy, and to the southwest, that's where the Navy serve and choose to settle. And then the area around Salisbury, where I live, is where the Army goes to die. So there are pockets of high density veterans communities. That doesn't mean that veterans do not exist elsewhere in the community. I guess I'd finish on this slide by saying veterans, yes, 1.84 million. If you add families and dependents, the numbers goes up to about 6 or 7 million. So when Anna talks about support to people who are not veterans, families and dependents, there's a choice here about accreditation, identification, provision of services, which is absolutely a choice both for statutory service provision and for third sector provision. A few slides on government. Firstly, context. If I think back to the back end of the previous administration, previous Conservative governments, we kind of, after 13 years of a Conservative government, reached the end of the road when it came to delivering new ideas. So you can see in the blue there, government was effectively focused on reviews, be it of things like the historic hurt of the LGBT plus community under the Atherton Review, be it looking at the people function under the Haythorne Trade Review, be it the review of Veterans Welfare Service provision, or a review of the Armed Forces Compensation Scheme. So we were in review mode. In the third sector, we were absolutely focused on cost of living and organisational sustainability, I would suggest. 2 years hence, new government, new level of ambition. So the context is changing, and I haven't even yet reached the implications of a new President of the United States of America in terms of the operational context. But from a government perspective, it was about ambition. So yes, we're going to come in and do a defence review or a security review. Yes, we're going to go in and provide an armed forces commissioner. Yes, we're thinking about a new veterans strategy, and yes, we're thinking about extension of the government. And I'll pick up on those in the next couple of slides. So the context is changing. And from a third sector perspective, organisational sustainability still remains on the table to this very day. So we are seeing here an increasingly muscular statutory service provision. So that balance between what the state is choosing to do and therefore how we in the sector reflect and react to that, I think is an important theme. Let's talk about the Covenant for a bit. Anna picked up on a little of this. So the Covenant came into being about 2008, 2009. So it's been around with us now for 15 years or so. Before that, it was the military covenant. So it's this idea of a contract between individuals and the nation. And the moral responsibility of the nation to think about disadvantage and to think about special consideration. The disadvantage of service predominantly in the areas of education, of health and of housing. So largely focused on the serving community, but not exclusively so, because sometimes there's a consequence of service which leads to disadvantage. And that is right to say there's a trustee on the Covenant Fund Trust. We speak long and hard in thinking in strategic terms about where we place our resource allocation in terms of Covenant funding as a consequence of that. It's buried in law, the Covenant, and I made the point earlier that the new government are keen to go further. So in the 2026 Armed Forces Bill, which is going through Parliament right now and will be on the statute books inshallah by the end of this year, there is an extension to the Covenant into other government departments. So for those in the room who are from the statutory service provision area, you will have to give a duty of due regard in the future as a legal construct when you think about dealing with a member of the armed forces community. The term due regard is really interesting because it's really tricky to define in legislative terms. And so government right now is scratching its head at the work at E-level to come up with some guidelines in each of the departments of state about how we measure duty of due regard and how we hold departments to account. This is tricky. So if you're sitting in a local authority in Lanarkshire and you have no money because you've been given a 23% reduction in funding, and government says to you, you need to give a duty of due regard to Corporal Snooks, who's just moved into Lanarkshire, you'll be saying, well, Mrs. Goggins has been living here for 50 years and she needs a council house. So if Corporal Snook goes to the top, and by the way, I have no more money for housing, how do I give due regard? These are the kind of gnarly questions that people will inevitably arise on when we get into the details of what this means. Nonetheless, from my perspective, a good thing. The other big wave-top issue at government level in the MOD is a new veterans strategy produced by the Office for Veterans Affairs, the OVA. And the move here is away from thinking just about support to the purpose of service. So you've got these two new kids on the block really in terms of celebrate and contribute. Celebrate in terms of recognition of service and the value that people who have served have made to the nation writ large, but contribute in the area of when people leave service, they bring those skill sets, those values and standards into the broader society. And so the MOD is scratching its head right now to try and work out how we provide an evidence base about the value of service. And I think that's really important when you've got a Prime Minister and a Secretary of State for Defence and a Chief of Defence Staff who are talking regularly about national contribution, about national readiness in an increasingly uncertain world. And so I think we will see, probably at the end of this year, maybe into next year, conversations at defence level and at the national level about big society, about connections, about collaboration, about readiness, about strategic reserves, about all of our whole of society approach to defence and security. Moving on to the armed forces charity sector. When Al Carnes was Min VP and when Louise Sanders-Jones took over from him, I should have called both of them, which was kind of a meeting engagement. The first thing that both said was 1,700 military charities, that's far too many, we need to reduce. And I said to both of them, with all due respect, ministers, That's not your job, because every charity has its own board, its own governance structure, and you don't own it. And we had a bit of a grumpy argument with both of them. It sounds like a big number, but actually if you slice and dice it down, you realise that we can look at manageable chunks. So of 1,700 military service charities, which by the way is 1% of the number of charities in this country, about 400 are in the museums and monuments area, the heritage sector area. Take those and put them to one side. About 600 are branches or associations, the British Legion, RAFA, Parachute Regiment, have association branches which are charities in their own right. Put those to one side. About 200 or 300 are service funds, so every ship or station or unit will have its own charitable funds. Take them out. We're down now to about the number of about, where are we, 500 or so welfare charities, which are the majority of those people who are in the room today fit in that sort of territory if you're a welfare charity. Of those, probably about 25 in money terms raise 93-94% of the money that enters the sector. So our bigger national charities, the SAFAs, the Legions, the Single Service Benevolent Funds, Blind Veterans, Blesma, Hague, charities like that, they are the big money area in terms of providing money and flowing money down into the sector. But the majority of our charities are small charities, either thematically or locally. So we'll talk to around 100 drop-in centres across the footprint. There are 500 breakfast clubs, not charities, but similarly providing coffee and companionship across the nation. There are charities such as Dig for Climate Recovery, or Digging for Britain, or Waterloo Uncovered, or my favourite charity, Kath, the cake lady, who makes cakes in Birmingham Hospital for the wounded, injured and sick. And she's a charity, it's fantastic. She provides a service, and by the way, she provides brilliant cakes as well. But the sector it's large, it's cluttered, but every charity does its business, and it does it passionately. Most of the charities, not all, are in COBSIA, which is a membership community. And we exist for 4 reasons, I think. Part of it is about what Anna says, which is connecting people together at the national level, unlike Thriving Together, which is a localised type of thing. So there's a complementarity there, which we need to make sure we pick up on. We've got a representative function to make sure that charities have a voice both into government and across the sector. We influence in terms of policy design, either with government or with the regulators, such as the Charity Commission or the CIC regulator, or the fundraising regulator, or various housing authority regulators. And then we provide thematic issues across the sector, so safeguarding, EDI training, casework management and caseworking, and the like, as a community. There's a structure at the centre which my boss, Kate McCulloch in the room, leads effectively. But actually, I think COBSIA as a membership community works at its best thematically. So we have what are called clusters or groupings or communities of interest or practice that come together. So charities which have got a like view will come together in groupings with colleagues from the statutory service provision from the government area to think about, at best, 4 things: policy design, policy change, implementation and delivery, measures of effectiveness, and holding to account. And if that works really well, and it does in some areas, arguably less than in others, we can actually get after design change. Opportunities and challenges. Demographics, absolutely. A competing narrative between the damaged versus the valuable, I think, is really important. What we're doing here, which is providing help for individuals, the purpose for that is for everybody to thrive. If we can get everybody back up to that level, we can all go home, job's done. Of course, that's not going to be the case, but in ideal terms, that's what we would be doing. The government, the MOD, as I mentioned here, an increasingly muscular and increasingly demonstrable government level of provision. So the government is putting its hand into the mangle of support in a way we've not seen before. We in the third sector have been around for, in some cases like the Royal Hospital Chelsea, over 300 years. So government, new kid on the block, coming into a well-established ecosystem. How do we manage that connectivity? And then from a sector perspective, sustainability will always remain on the table. But also this balance between what we do at the national level and what we do at the local level. I find that a fascinating dichotomy which we need to continue to address. I want to finish on 2 or 3 slides on VALA, and I'll pick up on some of the stuff that Anna talked about. Again, when Alan Carnes entered as Minister for the Veterans of People last 2024 September, in my first meeting, he said, we've got a really broken way of supporting veterans in the armed forces community. And I said, no, we haven't. We're a very good system. And we agreed to disagree. But Al's brainchild was VALA. So from his perspective, it was the ability centrally to have a better idea of where veterans needed support and how to provide and improve the access for the veterans community. We've moved on a wee bit since Al's first messaging. So we're now in the era of saying this is not just about veterans, it needs to be about the armed forces community. And Anna picked up the point that actually in the future that's going to have to be something that we think about when we think about the VALA centres, VALA hubs, in the sense that if your objects were about veteran support, you will need to think about changing. If you think about how you do identification of spouses, dependents, that's going to be something we need to get our head around. It would be fair to say there's more work to do in that area right now. The strength, I think, of VALA is not just about the hubs, it's about the 40 or so field officers that are going to be placed around the country, whose job it is both to connect down into the hubs, but also to provide some of that coordination function from an MOD perspective, looking out to other statutory service providers. And then a brain in the centre with a new one-star Caribbean Air or an Air Commodore or a Navy one-star type post, looking at the data, looking at the evidence, and working out how to regularise support across the country and how to determine what policy changes might work. I think it's exciting. I think the opportunities in VALA are really good. The pushback I will get from others in the sector, and certainly some of the large providers, the Legion, SAFA and the like, is this is going to fragment support. It's another form that overlays existing support mechanisms. Our job, I think, is to mitigate the risk of that and to give what is a new kid on the block the opportunity to develop and to thrive. The other challenge I get is VALA is around for this government. What happens in 2 years' time? I can't answer that. That's a political question. But I really think our job is to really lean in and support where practical. Anna talked about VALA funding. If you were to want to have a list of the current Tranche 1 approved VALA centres, that's on the board. My gut feeling is that we will look at a phase 2 programme coming out of the MOD in the next couple of months. Ministers are very keen to build on what has been delivered as a successful first tranche of bids, and so I expect the programme to come out of the MOD in the next month or two, noting that there are some slight tactical issues going on around the world right now, which are exciting attention.